My parents kidnapped me and held me hostage at their home so they could keep me away from my boyfriend, so I filed for protection orders and cut them out of my life. I got divorced mid-last year 2020. I started dating my current boyfriend who is an absolute sweetheart. We both have a medical background working as paramedics. When we first started talking he exaggerated when he had been working at the ambulance company. Yes, it was kind of a lie, but what he said was he was still working there as a full-timer when he was really on a volunteer status for some time. Kind of stupid, but not the end of the world, at least I don't think so. In January, my boyfriend had to go to the ER for some pretty nasty bleeding ulcers and was subsequently admitted. On my way home early that morning I crashed my car, resulting in a crushed left foot, torn ligaments in the right knee, a nasty concussion/TBI, and bruised lungs. Somehow my parents found out that he had exaggerated his employment with the ambulance company and I think they may have blamed him for my car accident. I ended up being in the hospital for about a week, undergoing 2 surgeries for my foot, and finally being able to get discharged home. A lot of this time frame I don't remember because of my concussion, but I do remember some snippets. I remember my boyfriend coming and visiting me, helping me bathe, get up to use the restroom, which is incredibly hard with both legs not working, and so on, making sure I was comfortable and everything. My mom would come and visit me a couple of days during this time period and start telling me that my boyfriend was lying to me about a lot of random stupid stuff, and started planting these lies in my head when she knew I was compromised mentally. My boyfriend and his 2 kids had been living with me and my daughter up until this point. I initially wanted to come home to all of them for my healing process, which is still ongoing almost 5 months later. My parents barged into my apartment and kicked him and his 2 daughters out of my apartment, telling my complex that I wanted them out and I had specifically asked them to take care of it. I did no such thing. Since we were in the process of adding my boyfriend and the girls to my lease, this ended up in a near eviction for me and I had to go to my parents to rehab. A whole nother story, but it was hell. My parents had me block my boyfriend, and I didn't get the chance to see him again until nearly 3 weeks after I was released from the hospital, at which point I was able to talk to him and clear up all the lies my parents told me he had fed me. I realized that they had been the ones telling me lies. Now my parents have been assisting my boyfriend's soon-to-be ex-wife. They have been in the process of divorce for over a year, getting false protection orders against him, and trying to get his kids taken away from him. At first, I was wavering on who I stood behind, but my parents had started coming to my apartment, stalking me and my boyfriend, making threats against his life, and overall making it to the point where I didn't feel safe in my own home because I just don't know when they are going to show up and demand me to hand over my daughter, threatening to go to my ex-husband to try and get my custody taken away, and so much more. I have since cut them out of my life, blocking their numbers from my phone, and making sure they have no contact with my daughter, but I still feel terrible completely cutting them out. Am I doing the right thing? Update: I, 32F, was in a major car accident in January of 2021. Ironically, I had been taking my boyfriend, 36M, to the ER because he had bleeding ulcers and ended up getting admitted to the hospital that night. This was still when they were enforcing COVID rules, so I was booted out of the hospital at about 3 in the morning. When I left it was snowing, and not thinking hopped on the freeway, which wasn't a good idea. I had been driving a lifted Jeep Cherokee with mud terrain tires, not the best ever for snowstorm driving. Getting off the freeway to go home, my brakes locked up and I went into a light pole headfirst at about 60 miles per hour. My Jeep did not have airbags. That was dumb. Needless to say, my car was totaled and I had to be extracted from the car by the fire department. This whole time I had been blacking out and losing consciousness, and I still get random flashes of I don't have all my memories from that night or several months after the accident. I got sent to the nearest trauma center, which was the same hospital I had just left. The nurses felt pretty bad about kicking me out. I ended up with a moderate to severe TBI, broken under my left eye, hairline fractures on my skull on the left side, bruising behind my ears, and black eyes. I had also cut open the inside of my mouth, had multiple lacerations all over my face. I broke my driver's side window with my face, broke and bruised some ribs, had hairline fractures in my spine, broke my right wrist, my right knee and my left foot, which required 2 surgeries, and I still need approximately 3 more. Needless to say, I was not doing great. I had recently gotten divorced the previous year and think that my entitled parents decided that my accident was my boyfriend's fault. I had to stay in the hospital for a total of 12 days, in which case the mild family drama exploded into a severe family inferno. As I got closer to being released, all I had wanted to do was go home to my boyfriend and our kids. He had 2 previously and I had 1. My entitled mother decided that wasn't what she wanted. On the phone we sound almost identical. The whole time that I was in the hospital she had been getting on the phone and impersonating me to my apartment complex management, even going as far as calling the cops to get my boyfriend and his 2 kids removed from my apartment. They were not on my lease yet. My mother also forged my signature on hospital paperwork, and made up a story about how my boyfriend was abusive to me and got him banned from seeing me at the hospital, again forging my signature and writing a letter stating I didn't want to see him. This whole time I was still suffering from the effects of my TBI and was delirious from the combination of pain medications and brain fog from my head injury. Mother even had the locks changed on my apartment without my consent. When I finally was released from the hospital, I was in a wheelchair because of my broken foot that had just had 2 plates and 10 screws surgically put in to hold it together, and an ankle to hip brace on my other leg from my knee being broken. I requested to go home to my apartment, but again Mother played it that I couldn't go home because I had a 2nd-story apartment and couldn't take care of myself. So I got sent to stay at my parents' house, against my will, an hour away from home because mother wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to let my boyfriend come back to my apartment. I spent almost a whole miserable month there. Mother refused to take me home even after I got crutches and was able to bear some weight. Initially, they refused to even go get my crutches from town because they didn't want me to have more mobility. Eventually, it got to the point where I had a friend come and pick me up from EM's house so I could go home because they kept refusing to let me go. As I gained clarity in my mind and was taken off the intense pain medication, I was able to start rectifying the situations that mother made a huge mess of in my life, but I'm still trying to recover in some areas. I didn't find out until much later when medical bills started coming in that mother had called my boyfriend's health insurance company, impersonating me, and had me removed from his insurance. It took months of calling and badgering and footwork on my part to get the situation figured out and have the insurance pay for what they were supposed to pay for. It almost caused me to go bankrupt. At the same time, mother signed me up for minimal health insurance coverage through the state that I had no idea I was enrolled in until I got a bill later stating that I back owed fees. Needless to say, I eventually completely cut both mother and my father out of life after finding out how much they tried to control and how much they messed my life up. I ended up getting protection orders after they tried to break into my house, stalked me, and sent family and friends over to harass me. This whole incident was the straw that broke the camel's back. There was quite a bit of retaliation on their side that threw my life into a total tailspin ever since, but I'm sticking to my guns and not backing down. More information. My mother did tell me eventually what she had done with my insurance and how she changed it, but by that point, it was too late and I was scrambling to try and rectify the situation and get as much covered from my hospital stay as possible. Even doing that, I still owe nearly $50,000 in medical bills. For those who had questions about how I had gotten on his insurance in the first place, when he started the job, he had the insurance from which we had qualified as domestic partners because of how long we had been living together and how long the relationship had lasted. For everyone wondering if we went to the cops, or are filing charges or anything along those lines, it's a very long story, but yes, we are. I have a very good lawyer, who actually represents myself and my boyfriend. It took me a while after I got home to my apartment to get to the point where I cut contact with EM. When I finally got home, I tried to start seeing my boyfriend again, and we started the long process of trying to heal from what happened, since mother had essentially kicked him and his 2 kids out of my apartment in the middle of winter. They really had nowhere else to go. The kids ended up staying with friends for a while and he stayed in his car and rented a hotel room when possible. I wasn't fully aware of what exactly was going on at the time, as mother had my cell phone and access to my phone, and while I was at her home she watched like a hawk to make sure that I wasn't contacting him. If I did, I got berated, screamed at, and at one point did not have access to my phone, which was all very confusing because I was on very heavy-duty pain medication, as well as having the confusion from the TBI. After I had made it back to my apartment and started to have more contact with my boyfriend, my mother escalated, staying at my apartment even though I told her I was fine, showing up randomly, and eventually getting so angry that I refused to cut contact with my boyfriend that she threatened to unalive him. That was when I grew a slight backbone and decided that it just wasn't going to get better. At that point, I filed for protection as well as my boyfriend, who copied my paperwork. When the first protection orders got dropped because we didn't have enough evidence, she had gotten a lawyer at this point, but we did not because we couldn't pay for a retainer, and this was before I had gotten smart enough to install cameras and a call recorder on my phone. My mother went to the city's prosecutor's office and told them that she wanted to press charges of perjury against my boyfriend. This is where the friendship with the prosecutor started, and it was very hard for us to get anything to stick because mother was getting in with our local PD and the prosecutor. Yes, they ended up going after my boyfriend and not me. Yes, that is selective prosecution. Yes, it is very illegal. At this same time, my mother and father are retired and have nothing better to do with themselves. They had been in contact with my boyfriend's ex-wife, and at the same time we were getting beaten down with a perjury case. They also helped my boyfriend's ex-wife start a custody battle for his children. They had been separated for some time, but the divorce had been stalled in court for several years at this point. They also filed in small claims court for lawyer and court fees after our first protection order was removed. My ex-husband had been allowing my daughter to see both of my parents still, which I did fight, and which has probably spurred the grandparents' right/visitation case that they filed during the same time. So we have been fighting one thing at a time and collecting all of the evidence that we can. All of the hospital paperwork, especially those that were forged, had to be requested from the hospital. The phone calls to the insurance company needed to be requested, and we needed our lawyer to get those. It wasn't something they were just going to give us, unfortunately. At this point, we have waded through almost all of the court filings my mother had thrown at us, and we are finishing gathering evidence so we can counterattack at this point. At the time, our lawyer was telling us to be patient and gather as much as we could, as when we get through the thick of it we can throw what we have into the system, but we needed and want to have enough to nail them to the wall. From here, there will be counter lawsuits both jointly between myself and my boyfriend and separate lawsuits, as well as submitting what we have for the identity theft. It's a very long process and it takes a lot of time, effort, and money to get things moving. For those of you wondering if me and my boyfriend got back together and how that is going, yes, we did get back together. It didn't take long for me to start realizing what was happening when I wasn't being given the heavy narcotics and my brain started the healing process from the TBI. It did take time for me to wade through everything that happened and try and recall memories. We did get back together, found a new place and moved back in together with his 2 kids and my daughter. We have had some hard times, and of course, we are both a little damaged from the whole process, but we both have counseling and are doing well.